we really came out of a lived experience many years ago. So the manager of our service is Carol Gossel. So I'm standing in for her doing this presentation. What I'll be covering today is one, are you seeing this? Topics to be covered?
Yeah, we can see that, don't worry.
Yeah. Rethink Sahayak's journey from National Schizophrenia Fellowship to DRE to CCGs to ICBs to overlooked minoritized ethnic communities, Rethink Sahayak Mental Health Services, mental health service access, barriers, myths, and stigma, engaging communities, and then the service that I deliver, which is a service user voice program. So we began as a befriending service with one worker in 1996, which was a response to local people's need for mental health support. People experience barriers to accessing mainstream mental health support for minoritized people for a range of reasons, and they will come to light in this presentation. We co-produced work with the national charity, which is it used to be called, or it was known as, National Schizophrenia Fellowship, and has rebranded to Rethink Mental Illness. So we co-produced work with the national charity and local communities and statutory agencies, and those relationships have continued to develop. So here's a picture of our early days as the National Schizophrenia Fellowship. This is our manager and founder of the organization, Carol Gossel. And here's a picture with local stakeholders, councillors and local people. So in 1999, we moved to our current address, which is in Gravesham High Street. We no longer have a blue fascia, we no longer have a black fascia, we now have a blue fascia. And here are some of the people and local dignitaries that have engaged with our service. In 2002, as I related earlier, we rebranded, our National Schizophrenia Fellowship rebranded as Rethink Mental Illness. And again, another image outside of our office with some of the members of our team standing around the front. In November 2004, Rethink launched its Crawley Asian Healthline, which is a helpline that people can call and be spoken to in Asian languages. Here are some of the publications that we've produced through the years. So something about domestic violence and mental illness, and aiming for change. So some of the things around honor-based violence, where women have experienced domestic violence on the back of issues that are deemed to be cultural. This is another one of our projects, which began in 2015, which is the Refugee Resettlement Scheme, which is a project which we do in partnership with Kent County Council around supporting people who are refugees from war-torn areas. That project is still running. And so here we look at some of the issues. And one of the things I need to make really clear is that we are quite a small team. We don't have a massive team of full-time staff. Most of our staff are part-time workers working on projects that evolve as the need emerges over time. So we're very small, very agile, and we really do have an open door type of approach, given that we have a high street office. However, we have to work to our contracts, which makes it quite a stretch holding things together. So here we go. Here are the issues that have come up throughout the years, and why we exist, and the particularities of our expertise. So overlooked minoritized ethnic communities. uh, find that they face particular kinds of barriers, and these barriers are quite comprehensive. So, and our position as Rethink Sahayak is that all individuals accessing mental health services will have potential barriers to overcome. Minoritized ethnic communities and migrants often face additional barriers around racism, culture, ethnicity, and language. There have been many research papers and public inquiries, government reports, which have detailed inequalities in access and quality of mental health service support to minoritized ethnic communities. Marginalized communities have developed self-help and lobbied public officials, which is what Rethink Sahayak is about, self-help and engagement. So we've seen throughout the years cross-governmental department responses, things like the Black Report, which looked at health services across the board, the NHS and how the NHS is delivered, and some of the challenges around equity of access. The Black Report actually looked at class as well as ethnicity and gender. There was a Clueness report which looked at Black people's experience of mental health services, where there was a particular individual, Christopher Clueness, whose experience of mental health services was particularly dire. There was a 10-year NHS Developing Race Equality Programme, also known as DRE, D-R-E. And today we've got the prime role of equality, which integrated care boards, who are now our health commissioning bodies. So we've watched all of these changes. And for us, the next steps of effectiveness need to move from overlooking to recognition and valuing minoritized ethnic communities' lived experience and expertise in the co-production of effective systems of mental health. So here's a list of the services we provide. So as I said, we're a small service, but we have a very broad reach and agility. So we provide recovery support, which is essentially one-to-one support for individuals who need that support. And there's a number of different ways that people will come to our service, and we make sure that we support them using whatever KPIs we have. We have the refugee project, which we've got. It actually boils down to one full-time worker. It's two part-time workers. And that's, as I said, in partnership with Kent County Council. And that involves a lot of one-to-one work with people who've come here. We meet the people at the airport and induct them into British society, essentially making sure they have everything that they need to survive. From somewhere to live, to an income, to training, to language support. And then we have group work, which this is a recent, well, we've had the Rethink Sangam group, which has been running for a number of years. I think it's really part of the befriending, the essence of the befriending, which is a lived experience group led by people from minoritized communities who have experiences of mental health challenges. And that isn't necessarily clinically diagnosed mental health challenges. It's people who are struggling with survival and need people to talk to, or need signposting, or need some kind of guidance and support. We've got the User Voice Project, which is a project that I deliver in partnership with EK360 and the number of organizations across Kent. And the essence of this project is to ensure that people who have experiences of mental health services, one, are able to share those experiences in a way that can be understood by mental health service providers and commissioners. So we gather people's stories in all kinds of community spaces, and we gather very real stories, whether they be positive stories, i.e., I was having trouble getting out of bed, and I contacted my GP. I got an appointment within a couple of days, went to see my GP, and I was referred to IAP. So that would be an ideal case scenario. To I've been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and I'm finding it difficult to get a meeting with my care coordinator. So that's the User Voice project. And then we have counseling volunteers. So now and again, we get people volunteer to provide counseling, and we give that as one of the services that we provide for people. And then there's the Asian helpline, Sussex, which essentially is a helpline for people who speak Asian languages. So here are some of the things that people have, some of the myths, service myths and barriers and stigma. So one of these is that, or one of the things that it can be a barrier is language. And language is not just whether somebody speaks Punjabi or Urdu or Hindi or Yoruba or Twi or Akan. It's about listening to people and being able to be responsive to people's experiences, which follows through into the whole thing around trust. So one of the things that people who knock at our doors often relate is that they have very little confidence in mainstream services as a consequence of bad experiences. There's empathy, where our team are largely people from minoritized ethnic communities, and so there is an in touchness with some of the ways that service providers work and may inadvertently put people off. And that all boils down to a level of cultural competency and a range of cultural competencies, which I think Sahayak is an exemplar of over our 26 years of experience. We operate within very clear bounds of confidentiality. Being in Gravesham, it's quite for some communities, minoritized communities, they can be quite small. So you can have situations where quite close family members have accessed our service, and we have to really have quite clear lines of separation. And sometimes we have to maneuver between colleagues to make sure that there aren't clashes where people end up meeting in our office, for example. And that comes again down to the attitude, skills, and awareness of our staff team, which is very much it's something about we're constantly growing and developing in terms of our team skill set, and also the kind of changing environment. I've noted minoritized communities are represented in our staff teams, and we think it's something that should happen in other service providers as well. Gender appropriate staff, religious concerns. So, I mean, throughout the years, one of the things around people accessing mainstream services has been issues around gender, where in some cultures, if the gender of the staff member isn't appropriate, they won't disclose. So they won't be able to get the support they need because they haven't been able to disclose. So agencies like ours are able to navigate some of those challenges. Religious concerns, clothing, segregation, and sacred time. So we know about things around hospitals and hospital wards where you have mixed wards, which can cause challenges, and things around people being able to have their prayers. So Muslims pray 5 times a day, and they pray towards the Qibla in a particular direction. And when those things are not recognized and valued, it can distort people's experience and whether they would want to use a service again or not. And as I noted, bad experiences of services in the past, service flexibility, and awareness of evolving community needs. I'm looking at this presentation and wondering, I hope I'm not talking to myself, because I should have asked for feedback as I'm going along.
No, I mean, we can see the slides and it's all making sense to me, but I
Okay.
just got a thumbs up in the chat as well.
Okay, great, great. Please feel free to stop me at any time. Hi, Rahul. I hadn't seen you earlier.
I'm so
Just
sorry, everyone. I had technical issues this morning. So I'm a colleague of Paul's. I also work for Rethink Sahayak. I'm an ethnic minority support worker. Um, like I said, I do apologise because I had technical issues. That's why I was delayed in joining the session.
No worries at all.
Um,
Welcome.
great to see you, Rahul. Good to see you. You can
Likewise,
stop
nice
me.
to see everyone.
You can stop me if there are any flaws in my presentation. Thank
Not at
you.
all, Paul. I think what you've covered is fantastic, and what I've seen so far. Obviously, once you've sort of elaborated on a few points, I can add additionally. Or if anyone has got any questions, please feel free to ask, and me and Paul are here to answer.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks,
If there are
Rahul.
any questions that come up as well, please feel free to pop them in the chat and we can address them after the presentation as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic. Are you still seeing the whole screen, or do I have to widen it out to the whole screen?
It looks okay, Paul. As you were going
Okay, great.
along, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So here are some of the other myths, and these are myths that have been going along throughout the years. We look after our own. So the idea that leave the communities to look after their own, and there's no need for other service providers to do anything about it. Then there's these myths around people with some of the kinds of ideas around people with mental illness having been stigmatized. So there's a concept of pagal in Punjabi and Hindi. And then there's this idea that people have been cursed, that somehow their mental health distress is a consequence of some kind of curse. And then there are these people expecting cures from religious leaders.
Yeah.
And that could sometimes mean sending people abroad, sending family members abroad for spiritual healing. Now, in terms of engaging communities, and these are the things that we've learned through the years, having appropriate literature, building relationships, which is quite critical, being able to build those trust relationships, making use of wider networks. And as I said earlier, Rethink is an organization that has consistently ensured that we work with other agencies and build good quality relationships with other agencies for referrals and such. We largely employ minoritized ethnic staff, which is ensures that there is that level of empathy and a deeper understanding and cultural competencies that are dynamic in nature as well. I mean, as communities engage in the UK, there's a dynamism, there's a changing nature of culture, there's a changing nature of language. So that dynamism of having minoritized ethnic staff is quite important. Um, we generally raise mental health and well-being awareness in the community. So as I said, my program, the User Voice program, is very much a program of outreach. I go into all kinds of community venues, and I'd welcome invitations to community events where there are minoritized ethnic communities there. We feed back to commissioners with recognized gaps and in services, though I think I think there's a long way to go and a lot of
Yes,
learning
yeah.
to do. And then there's the we involve minoritized ethnic communities and service users. So as I said, the Rethink Sangam group, which Rahul is one of the facilitators
Yeah,
of the
that's correct. Yeah.
Sangam group. So here's one of the events that we have annually, which is the Sadia Wan Sunu, which is Listen to Our Voices, which is an event that's very much about women who have experienced domestic violence or domestic marginalization. So it's really a platform where women from minoritized ethnic communities can present the qualities that they're bringing to bear in Gravesham, Kent, and wider afield. It has evolved to a new kind of event. Um, and here's one of our leaflets, which speaks about what we do with our contact details. Here's another of our leaflets. And this is a little bit about the project that I deliver, and it's a part-time project. It's a co-produced, and the DEC stands for diverse diverse ethnic communities, diverse communities connect. So we originally were Swell User Representation Forum. So we had a project in Swell, which is, you'd know of Sittingbourne and Sheppey. So the project used to be in Sittingbourne and Sheppey, and we made our major inputs by, one, having support groups on the island of Sheppey and in Sittingbourne fortnightly for people with mental health problems. And this was not merely marginalized communities, it was a much broader base of all people with mental health challenges. And that group also input to the Mental Health Action Group, or MHAG. And the MHAGs were groups that were meetings of local providers, statutory providers, and commissioners in each of what were once the clinical commissioning group areas. So there was a Swale clinical commissioning group area, and we had a mental health action group in that area. In 2017, through a co-production process, that is a process that all local statutory and voluntary organizations were engaged in, that were engaged in mental health service delivery, were facilitated by EK360 in developing a new program. And that new program is the User Voice program that we now deliver as the DEC, Diverse Communities Connect. And this project started in 2022 and is focused on minoritized ethnic mental health voices of Gravesham. So here's the webpage for that project. So African, Asian, Black and ethnic minority backgrounds are often overlooked. And do you care for people with mental health needs? And essentially, it's a program for ensuring people who are using mental health services in Gravesham help to shape future services. Here's a little questionnaire that I'll generally ask people. I'll engage people in all kinds of ways. I'm the service provider for this. So I'll engage people in all kinds of ways, from picking up a conversation in a church hall to speaking to people in the streets. And some of the times I might just go through this questionnaire. Who do you talk to when you feel happy or sad? Do you or someone you know have a mental health problem? What services do you know about? Is there anything you want to say about local support for your community? And then here's our kind of demographic thing around their postcode and their ethnicity. I think that's it. Here are my contact details. And I think, thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really, really informative. And it was great to hear about all the work that you guys do within Rethink. You got a little applause in the chat if you can't see. So thank you very much. That was really, really helpful. Are there any questions for Paul or Rahul in regards to what you guys do? I'm also just gonna. Oh, you have got a hand up, Jane.
Hi, you folks. Thanks ever so much for that, Paul. That was really enlightening. So I work for the NHS Armed Forces Network, and we cover Kent and Sussex. So obviously we've got quite a large Gurkha and Nepalese population in Kent. Yeah. I'm interested, do you do any specific work or engagement with that community?
We have nothing specific, but what we do have is we have a couple of groups, and we also have one-to-one work which you can access through the Spotlight process, but we don't have anything specific around those communities. In the past, we had a floating support service. So we've gone through many kind of changes in terms of our contracting. And we once had floating support where we used to go out to people in Kent. So I recall going to, I think it was Canterbury, where there was a Gurkha community. But yeah, we're aware of these communities. However, no, we don't have anything specific, but we'd like the connections with the likes of yourself.
Yeah, I'm thinking if I could speak with you after this, maybe set up a meeting, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic.
Please feel free. Yeah.
Thanks,
Sounds like
folks.
a really good connection. And thank you guys. I think you've popped the information in the chat, so thank you for that. I've also just popped in our little feedback form. I send this out at the end of every session, so if you guys are able to just fill that in, that'd be lovely, just to kind of see how we're going. Are there any more questions or any type of feedback? I was just going to say, in terms of looking through the attending the presentation myself, it was really interesting about the different in the stigmatizing, because obviously there are things that I already knew as a person of, like, you know, but it's things that you mentioned. I was like, oh yeah, typical, like you would think they're kind of assumed, but you know, it's just interesting to see that they're like that. So thank you for that. It's really enlightening. And yeah, perfect.
Just a note on terminology is we've gone through a number of different terms referring to people who essentially are marginalized as a consequence of that nasty word. And I know people find it a very uncomfortable word, racism, which is institutional, interpersonal, and we've got a whole language around that. And I think throughout the years, we've gone through many different permutations of language. So we've gone from Black to Black and minority ethnic, to Black, Asian and minority ethnic. And I think today, the kind of received wisdom in communities is around referring to minoritized ethnic communities, which is a lot more dignified and it's a lot more insightful with regard to the expansiveness of experience. So where people in the past used to maybe refer to Black, and some people were uncomfortable with being referred to as Black. So there's the tradition of Black being identified as people who were of African descent. There's the whole idea of Black being a political designation, which is about an opposition to racism. Then there are others who will say, well, we need to be more specifically identified. So the construct of Asian. And then when you look at Asian, if you're an Asian in America, it means something very different from an Asian in the UK.
Yeah.
And so it's about having a more enlightening language. And also the people who have these experiences of marginalization. If I've just come over from Nigeria and somebody refers to me as a BAME, I'll be like, huh? What's that? Or I've just come from Afghanistan and somebody says, you're from the BAME community. And I'll say, no, I'm not. So this whole thing about minoritized ethnic communities is about raising the game in terms of our language and inclusivity.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. I like that insight, and it's a really valuable piece. So thank you for that. Nick's just popped in the chat if it's okay for the slides to be sent out separately. I think we can send that out.
I think so. What I'll do is I'll run it by my manager.
Yeah,
Carol.
through Carol. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. We are recording the session as well, so we will be able to we'll be sharing that with our newsletter and everything as well. So perfect. Thank you guys.